Hello there. What is going on, everyone? Today we're going to be doing an Armada video. This is the first video in a new series I'm calling Ships of the Fleet, where we break down an entire faction's ships and give you kind of a rundown of what role these ships serve. Now, this is kind of a supplement to my What to Buy First videos, which, again, those are going to continue. There will be a new version later this year for the What to Buy First when on a budget, but I just kind of wanted to talk about the ships as a whole as far as the classes of ships, and I wanted to start with Clone Wars, because I believe we're getting a lot of newer Clone Wars players to Star Wars Armada. If you guys are new here to the channel, be sure to click that subscribe button and be sure to enter to win the $25 Amazon gift card giveaway. You just have to be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. I want to hear what your favorite Separatist ship is. Let me know down in the comment section. Also, while you're down there, go ahead and click that See More button. Look in the video description. We've got a lot of other helpful links down there. You can head over to Crabbok.com, get a free Armada AI expansion. We've got a lot of content over there. Also, jump in my Discord. I would love to have you guys in there. We have a great family-friendly Discord for Star Wars and other tabletop games, as well as different games like Marvel Crisis Protocol, Armada, X-Wing, Legion, lots of tabletop and board games. We discuss those there. So it's a great family-friendly environment to have you. I'd love to have you there. And there's other links for social media and Patreon and t-shirt stores, all kinds of stuff like that. So if you want any of those links, they're all down in the description below. So let's go ahead and start breaking down some of our ships. So I'm going to be breaking these down two at a time, because for all of the different ships of the Separatist fleet, there are two versions. And I want to start off with our Munificent class. The Munificent is a very, very common, very recognizable ship from the Separatist fleet. You may have seen Munificents galore in the prequel films as well as in Star Wars The Clone Wars. The Munificent is currently the only medium ship for the Separatists. It also may be one of the first ships Separatist players see, because it's featured right there in the middle of the Separatist player starter. This is one of the first flagships a lot of Separatist players field, and it's also a very good broadside ship. So what I mean by medium ship is it's got a medium base. There's small, medium, large, and also huge ships, but huge ships are very rare. In fact, currently there's only one. So a medium ship is kind of got some of the best of both worlds in a lot of cases, in that they tend to be a little bit tanky, but without having to sacrifice too much. And they tend to have a little bit of maneuverability without having to sacrifice too much. And they kind of tend to be jacks of all trades, so to speak. And the Munificent definitely fills this role in the Separatist fleet. You have, out of your two varieties, you have the comms frigate and you have the star frigate. The star frigate is slightly more expensive and also comes with the defensive retrofit, allowing it to take certain defensive upgrades, making it to be a good midpoint flagship. Also a very good first flagship for some of your first fleets. The comms frigate tends to be the cheaper version that is usually taken with less upgrades, even though it has many of the same upgrade slots. A lot of times when you're looking for an extra ship that can survive and throw out a decent amount of damage, especially flying in a broadside arc, broadside being the left and right firing arcs, the comms frigate may be your ship of choice. They each have brace, redirect, and the new salvo. I call it new because older players might not recognize salvo. Salvo is the defensive token that allows you to counterattack using your rear printed battery armament. And so that's a really cool new effect that is a lot more common now in the Clone Wars. But the Munificent is kind of filling a lot of different roles. With 6 hull, that puts it right about in the middle. It does also have brace, which is super important. So the only thing that the comms frigate is lacking really is the defensive retrofit to kind of gain easier access to spending those defense tokens or other things to aid in survivability. But the Munificent doesn't really excel in any particular area. It can do adequate squadron commands. You know, the Star Frigate's a little bit less on the squadron commands than the comms frigate. So maybe the comms frigate works as a good, carrier slash do anything we needed to do and hopefully still survive type of ship, whereas the star frigate tends to be the better anti-squadron and also better flagship with its defensive retrofits. But outside of that, they do have the ion cannon slot, the turbo laser slot, a lot of upgrades that allow them to, kind of diversify their firepower a little bit. And also, they work well in larger fleets. Now, a lot of players will only have one of these since there is only one in the starter. So unless you've bought multiple starters, there's really only one way to get this, and that's with the $100 starter pack. So if you want to fly multiples of these, you're going to need multiple starter packs. But as your collection grows, I think you'll find you don't really need too many Munificents. I think there's other ways to fill up the Separatist fleet. So it makes for a good filler or medium ship, kind of augmenting anything else your fleet is already doing, but it's usually not the centerpiece of a fleet. On to the second ship that Separatist players will have seen is the Hardsell class battle refit and the Hardsell class transport, otherwise known as the Hardsell, the two different halves of the same coin here. The Hardsell is a really interesting ship in that it's the only small ship currently available to the Separatists. It also comes in the starter. However, most players will have two, since you do get two of these along with your one Munificent, giving you the kind of building blocks for your own first fleet. Now, this is also a ship that its two different versions fly very, very differently. In a lot of the other factions, small ships tend to be very fast and maneuverable. This is an example where that is not exactly the case. They can go speed 3, so they are moderately fast, but they are not particularly maneuverable. This is generally a ship that wants to be pointed towards the enemy. However, it also, being a small ship, serves kind of a support role if you're running the transport version, or a gun line type of ship if you're running the battle refit. And those are two very different roles, but they can also be filled by small ships in different factions. So this one feels like it has the greatest distinction between the battle refit and the transport that any other two ships in the game really have. And that's something that really makes the Hardsell shine, because I feel like when they were looking at ships to be able to pull to fit a small based ship in here, there weren't that many, because a lot of Separatists ships tend to be larger and either medium or large size, or even potentially bigger than that. So I think they wanted to say, look, we're not going to be able to make that many different small ships. Like, look at the Rebels. They have like dozens and dozens of small ships, so they can have small ships dedicated for support, small ships dedicated to flanking, small ships dedicated to gun lines, small ships dedicated to survivability. Well, we need something that can do a kind of a little bit of everything. And so I think that's one of the choices that led to the Hardsell being so diverse between its two types. So the battle refit has a stronger front arc at long range. It's got 3 red dice in the front. It also has 2 anti-squadron dice. Both versions of this ship are going to have 5 hull, an evade, a brace, and a redirect token. So now with 3 shields in the front, only 1 on the sides, and 2 in the back, it does make their sides fairly weak. It also means their rear, while it has more shields, is also pretty weak because it has no way to fire back at you. These are also incapable of salvoing, because not only do they not have a salvo token, but even if they were to gain one through some kind of extra means, they wouldn't be able to spend it because there's no rear printed battery armament to actually return fire with. So they cannot really, even think about salvoing. But this is a ship that just wants to be pointed at you and shooting at you. Now, with the battle refit, that is definitely more the case. They do have offensive and potentially defensive things. This could potentially make for an option as a flagship. With its 5 hull is still kind of low, but combine that with a brace and a defensive retrofit, it could keep your commander alive for a little while. There's a decent enough number of shields, and you do have the ability to redirect. This one kind of reminds me a little bit of the Nebulon B from the Rebellion in Star Wars Armada, in that it only has 1 shield on the sides and 3 in the front, but the big difference here is that it does start with that redirect. It also has evade, which has been improved a lot ever since the Clone Wars Armada came out. So it is a ship that has got a little bit of survivability, which is something that a lot of small ships in the game, amongst all factions, tend not to have as much of. Now, if we switch over to the Hardsell class transport, we're going to notice that our survivability goes down, but some other things increase, or rather our offensive capability goes down, and our survivability goes down a little bit too, because we lose that defensive retrofit. Amongst things that increase, however, is our squadron value. Now, this ship is a Command 1 ship, means you can do whatever you need on the fly. But with a 2 squadron value, the Hardsell class transport can make for an adequate carrier. With 3 engineering, it can also repair its own damage cards, which is pretty good. Both of them, of course, have the 3 engineering, but the transport has the increased squadron value, so it can support squadrons in that way. It can also support your fleet with the fleet support upgrade, which is something that usually is only seen on flotillas for certain other factions. So you don't really see a whole lot of fleet support. So it's nice to see the Hardsell class transport show up with something like that. It also has the support team and 2 officer slots, which means its entire upgrade bar is vastly different than the battle refit, which has more offensive and defensive type upgrades. The Hardsell class transport has almost an exclusively support-based upgrade bar, which allows it to perform a variety of different roles. This one can be a carrier support. You can put things like bomber command center on here and really help your fleets and your bombers, especially those hyena bombers that the separatists like to use. But you can also run this to support your other ships. It can be squadron support, other ship support. It can do a variety of very different things, and it can command squadrons of its own. So it has a ton of flexibility between these two. Sometimes players will run multiple Hardsells in a list, and sometimes you'll run multiple Hardsell battle refits, have them all flying in the same direction, having a big, long gun line flying forward. You know, the opponent can't get around you because you have them all lined up shoulder to shoulder, marching forward kind of in formation. Sometimes there's a single Hardsell class transport in a list to be that crucial, important part of the support structure, keeping that fleet flying and doing what it's supposed to be doing. And the Hardsell can perform lots of those different roles. Just about every role in the game, the Hardsell can kind of do it at a pretty cheap point cost. And so it's a cool thing that you have 2 of them in the starter, although a lot of builds will run more than 2. Again, if you want to get more of these, you're going to have to buy another starter because you're only going to get 2 in that starter, and that's the only place you can get them. Moving forward towards the second wave of Star Wars Armada, which we also refer to as Wave 10 for Armada, the second wave of the Clone Wars, the Providence. Now, the Providence is definitely a very iconic ship. You might recognize the carrier or the dreadnought from multiple noted commanders. Grievous used one of these at the beginning of Episode 3. You may have also seen Admiral Trench in one of these. They are a it's a very recognizable ship. The Providence is the first ship that kind of screams that it wants to be your flagship. This is the most expensive and like the heaviest loaded ship basically to run for the Separatists, and this is where things really get specialized because you have 2 different versions of this ship, but they both really can function very, very well as a flagship. This is the type of ship that is also going to be a lot more expensive than it looks. It looks like it's only 105 points, and that's certainly cheaper than something like an Imperial Star Destroyer, but it is a ship that will not, will not come in for cheap, even though it looks cheap, because this ship has so many upgrades that it really needs to take advantage of, and there's so many different ways to build these types of ships and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But let's look at what they have. So first off, the Providence has 9 hull, which is good and survivable. It also comes with brace, redirect, contain, and of course salvo. Now with 3 dice in the rear arc, that means that salvo's not going to be half bad. Now there are different upgrades that you can put on the Providence to increase the effectiveness of that salvo, and the Providence can really take and work well with just about all of those upgrades to where its salvo now becomes very, very deadly. So it's a ship that likes upgrades that can help its salvo, but that's not the only way that you would build it. Now you've got lots of dice when we look at this thing. We've got lots of dice in the front arc, but even more dice in the side arc. But it's definitely a ship that can either function only side arcing or double arcing if it can manage to kind of point its front just at a slight angle. It kind of wants to fly around you enough that it might get the front shots and also the side shot. But if not, just the side shot is going to work really well too, because then it can get you again when it salvos you. Has very low maneuverability if it's trying to go fast, but the fact that it can go fast is really, really good. It's going to really shine though when you slow down to speed 2, and then it has better maneuverability. And of course, if you're going all the way down to speed 1, it's going to have 2 clicks right there, so it can do tighter turns if it needs to. But once it speeds up, it begins to lose maneuverability. But that's usually a good sacrifice to make, because if you need to go fast, at least you have the option while sacrificing maneuverability. As for upgrades, the carrier is going to really shine in that it has both a defensive retrofit, as well as the fleet command, which is going to be able to hand out lots of different commands to your fleet and allow your fleet to specialize, whether you want intensify firepower, shields to maximum, extra movement, extra squadrons, all kinds of good fleet commands. There's also new commands that have come out with this wave too, like hot landing and things like that. So really good fleet command options. Offensive retrofit, and then of course ordnance, ion cannon, and turbo laser is going to allow this thing to have a little bit of everything that's available for the offensive weaponry too, because it has so many dice. It's going to want different ways to employ upgrades that are going to deal with those different colors of dice respectively. And since every arc has every color of dice in it, it's really not going to be doing everything it can do if you don't add some of those offensive upgrades to it as well. So this is a ship that really wants to be your flagship. It also wants to have a little bit of fleet-wide support, and it wants to have lots of offensive firepower, and it also wants to upgrade its salvo if you can. Now, you don't always run it with all of its upgrades, but if there was ever a ship that I most commonly run every single upgrade available, it's this ship, because it can make excellent use of every upgrade you put on there, and that's something that tends to happen a lot, especially with new players. You run lots of upgrades and you end up putting too many on there, and you don't need all of them. This one is very likely to need all of them, so that's one kind of cool thing about that. But by the time you do that, you can be pushing almost 200 points with this ship, so it can get very, very expensive very, very quickly. Now, the Dreadnought, on the other hand, actually loses some anti-squadron firepower. It goes down to only 1 blue die as opposed to 2 black, which does also gain it some range. Again, it's a 3 command, 4 squadron, 4 engineering ship, just the same as the other one. Again, it does a little bit of everything, and it does just about everything potentially really well. But the Dreadnought, while it's the same cost, loses some things and gains some other things. So the Dreadnought is a little bit less of a carrier and a little bit more of a battleship. Now, it can still be a carrier, but it doesn't have the things that make that carrier shine, like the defensive retrofit. Of course, there are titles you can put on here to give it one, but it has 2 offensive retrofits. I'm sorry, it has 2 turbo laser upgrades, which are more offensive, and in addition to the ion and ordnance upgrades. So it has a lot more offensive capability in that regards, and it also has the weapons team and the offensive retrofit. So the weapons team can allow for some really nasty things to happen. A lot of times, once upon a time, we used to only ever take gunnery team on the weapons team upgrade, but you're not really restricted to that anymore. There's so many really good weapons team upgrades that you can really find lots of different ways to build an offensive Providence class Dreadnought. Again, it's going to get more expensive when you start doing that. I think out of the 2 of these, if I'm looking to max out all the upgrades, I'll take the carrier and make it my flagship. And if I'm looking to just have a purely offensive ship with maybe a couple of turbo lasers and a weapons team, then maybe I'll go with the Dreadnought, because I might be able to at least specialize in the red dice aspect of it or something to that effect. Plus, it does have a little bit more red dice on the sides, kind of sacrificing a blue dice for that. So maybe a little less accuracy and a little bit more of a ceiling for chances for those double reds. But really good battleship and also really good flagship. And now we get to our 4th and final ship of the Separatist fleet. And again, this is not the final ship that exists for Separatists in the Star Wars universe. This is just the final capital ship that exists for the Separatists in Star Wars Armada currently. Although if they do continue to make more ships under Atomic Mass Games, then we'll probably see more in the future. But for now, this is our 4th and final. It's the Recusant. And this one is the first ship that is in a very weird spot and doesn't really conform to a lot of norms. And I feel like this is the first ship that really gives the Separatists a really good sense of faction identity, as well as faction and ship specialization, because this is a front arc powerhouse. And one of the things that really makes this ship kind of stand out is that it's a large ship, but it's also considered by many to be very fragile. And on the surface, it might not seem very fragile, but I'll explain why. So the Recusant has 8 hull, which is still decent, but it's a little bit less. So it makes a slightly less tanky carrier. It does have a brace, but it also has an evade, a redirect, and a salvo. And so what those tokens, but it also has no defensive retrofit on either of its ships. It has no way to gain a defensive retrofit. So what that all kind of boils down to is that a single accuracy can stop your brace and also stop you from spreading damage around through the shields. So it's stop you from you're not going to be able to contain because you don't have a contain there either. So damage is more likely to get through, and your attacker is also more likely to crit against you as well, since it doesn't have that many shields even in the front arc. And the front arc on this ship is printed extremely wide, so it's almost always going to be shooting from the front arc, which means it's always going to have that front arc pointed at the enemy, and it means you're almost always going to be taking damage directly on the front arc, almost never on the sides. So what that really means is you've only got 3 shields, and you've got a brace and a redirect, and that'll keep you alive for a little while. But unlike a true flagship designed tanky survivable ship to keep your commander alive, this one under sustained firepower will begin to take hull damage much faster than most other ships that are more suited to being a flagship. Now, there's ways around that by running engineering commands and having other support ships nearby. You can keep a Recusant alive. However, if you build a Recusant right, it's going to be such a threat to your opponent offensively that they will probably concentrate firepower on it that much more and bring it down as fast as they can, as a matter of fact. This is one of those ships that when you put it on the battlefield, it often becomes priority target number 1 for your opponent. There are certain card combinations and titles for this ship that allow it to throw insane numbers of dice at long range, and even black dice at long range, that normally don't get thrown around quite so much. It also has great titles that just give it even more dice from that front arc, and it really allows itself. This ship can really specialize in the front arc shot, and that's really where it stands out. Now, there have been plenty of great ships that have great front arc shots before, but this might be the best one, and it kind of suffers for that by being more easily destroyed also from the front arc. So it's kind of like a glass cannon in that way. But at the same time, the trade-off is it's also cheaper. So it's not, you're going to save a lot of points off of, like, I'll compare them to an Imperial Star Destroyer again. 110, 120 points. So you're saving, like 35 points off the ship cost as a whole. Now, there's also a lot less upgrades available for this ship too, which does mean that you're not going to be able to put quite as many offensive boosts on it, but out of what's available, it does allow you to really build this ship to pack an incredible forward punch. Now, it does have decent dice on the sides and on the rear, but that's mostly only in case things go wrong, because if you fly this ship correctly, it's going to be pointed right at your opponents, unloading that front arc on them and taking all the dice also on the front. Now, it has pretty good maneuverability, especially even at speed 3. So this one wants to charge directly at your opponents. If it overshoots them, you might find that could be a blessing in disguise, especially if it's later in the game, because your opponent might not be able to see your front anymore, and they may find themselves having to shoot at your sides and rear, which mysteriously still have shields remaining if all of the fire had been coming to the front. But it's a very frontal focused ship that tends to play very much like a glass cannon and can really be the biggest offensive threat on the battlefield in a lot of Separatist fleets. It's also a very fun ship, I think, to fly, because I like to play very offensively. And that is our breakdown of the different ships of the fleet for the Separatist faction. If you like this video, go ahead and give me a thumbs up and let me know what you think down in the comments section. Do you want to see more of these? The next ships of the fleet video I'll be doing will be the Republic, and I recognize that I have not gone into squadrons yet, and the fighter squadrons. I will also be talking more about those as a whole as well, but I wanted to start off talking about the ships. All right, guys, if you like this video, I've got plenty more. You can check out my other videos. You can hop in the Discord. I've got some video libraries in there as well to help you find what you're looking for. I will talk to you guys later. I want to thank all my patrons for continuing to support the channel. You guys are absolutely amazing, and I couldn't do this without you, so thank you for your continued support. And always remember, the first transport got away because of you and your efforts. You're the hero of the rebellion.